Previously on Bio Ball Z, our heroes entered the cardiovascular system to confront the different types of blood cells and blood vessels. And just when they thought they got all the knowledge that they needed to pattern up, they were attacked by this past paper question on heart valves replacement. But by using the highlights, they were able to discover how to decode exactly what the question wanted them to answer. And now, our heroes have entered the realm of non-communicable diseases such as diabetes, obesity, lung cancer, and more. Will our heroes be able to defeat these non-pathogenic ruffians? Find out in today's episode of Bio Ball Z. Here's the retrieval questions for this lesson. You know what to do. Pacemaker cells are located in the right atrium. Coronary heart disease can be treated using stents and statins. Group 1 ions are 1+ ions. Group 7 ions are 1 negative ion. Density is mass over volume. And carbon dioxide has a molar mass of 44. Here I have a graph showing the global number of deaths in millions. See if you can work out these challenge questions. We see that communicable diseases are highlighted in red, and the highest by far is the lower respiratory infections. And if you remember from my video on communicable diseases, they are caused by pathogens, which means they can spread from person to person. Lower economically developed countries, you wouldn't expect them to have more deaths by non-communicable diseases. It should be more caused by communicable diseases such as pathogens due to a lack of sanitation. There are several factors that can increase your risk of a disease. You could have genes that make it more likely for you to get certain diseases. Lack of exercise as well, if you're not getting your cardio and that. Age is a big one. The longer you live for, the more likely you are to get certain diseases. Of course, diet is a big one, and drugs. UV exposure can damage your DNA, and finally, passive smoking can also affect you even if you don't smoke yourself. Substances that cause cancer are known as carcinogens. These cause mutations that mean that your cells do not stop dividing. Examples of these are what you've probably heard of. You've heard of asbestos and the tar in cigarette smoke. Tumors are a mass of abnormal, uncontrolled cells dividing. The root word actually comes from the Latin word for swelling. You can see from the picture that these uncontrolled cells cause a swelling or a lump. And there are two types of tumors. We have benign tumors and malignant tumors. The top picture here shows the differences between the two types of tumors, and the bottom shows two systems in the body. They will help you answer these challenge questions. Looking carefully, we can see that both types of tumors expand, they get bigger. The type of tumor that can start in one organ and end up in another will be the malignant tumor. We can see that they infiltrate as well as expand, and so they can travel around in the blood or in the lymph system. Normally, benign tumors are not harmful because they have a capsule which limits their chances of moving around. But they still expand, and in places like the skull, which can't expand by itself because of the bone, if you've got a tumor expanding there, that could cause high pressure there in your brain, which can lead to problems. Let's move on to cigarette smoke now. We can see the structure of nicotine.
What nonsense is this?
You don't need to know the structure, it's just needed for the upcoming activity. There are two other images here and this mega challenge. Even my top set struggled when I was trying to explain the significance of this, so Take your time, look at the images we've got here. We've got 4 images, the 2 structures, insect, and also this package here. Use all of them to answer this challenge question. All of it is linked. Well, we can see that nicotine and this substance look very similar. And this substance is found in insecticides that are used to kill fleas. So if we remember that nicotine is in plants, and plants use their leaves for photosynthesis, it makes sense that tobacco plant leaves will make an insecticide. So nicotine is actually an insecticide. It kills the insects, which stops them from actually eating the leaves. So they have more leaves, more photosynthesis can happen, and then the plant can grow more. Krusty the Clown was gonna help us understand some of the effects of nicotine on the body. Nicotine itself is actually pretty harmless. It won't damage any of your organs severely. But looking at Krusty the Clown, we can see that nicotine is highly addictive. And unfortunately, cigarettes don't only contain the addictive, harmless nicotine, but they also contain harmful substances as well. So when people consume cigarette smoke to get that nicotine, they also end up exposed to the other dangerous substances in the cigarette smoke as well. Now we will look at the second important substance in tobacco smoke, which is tar. We briefly covered this earlier. I have these pictures that show some of the structures that you can find in your air passages. I briefly looked at the lungs in this video, you can check that out. Now have a go at these challenge questions. Cilia are these hair-like projections in your airway that move debris from your lungs to where your nose and mouth is. And we can see that the debris is moving towards the right hand side, so the lungs must be on the left hand side. They're moving it away from the lungs. This means that when cigarette smoke stops them moving, dirt and debris and pathogens end up falling into the lungs, which can increase the risk of an infection. For the last challenge question, we saw in a previous video that the alveoli, which is the site of gas exchange, have these bowl-like structures which increase the surface area for diffusion. Whenever you've got a cell or a structure that's folded or has got lots of surface area, is to increase the rate of absorption of certain minerals and nutrients. So a breakdown of the structure will mean that there is a reduced surface area, so less oxygen is absorbed and therefore less aerobic respiration is happening. If there is anything else that you're gonna get from this video, it's that tar is a carcinogen which can cause lung cancer. Now we have this specific effect of one of the main 3 substances in cigarette smoke. We just saw lung cancer, which is caused by tar, and we saw nicotine, which is addictive. Now we've got this toxic gas here. Look carefully at all the images that I've got here, and they will help you answer these challenge questions. We have 1 carbon and 1 oxygen, so we are dealing with an oxide of carbon. But since we only have 1 carbon, it's carbon monoxide, like mono for 1, and di will be 2 and tri will be 3, etc. In the top image, we see that the carbon monoxide is replacing the oxygen in the blood. This means that there will be less oxygen in your hemoglobin in your blood, and therefore less aerobic respiration will be happening. And finally, the smokers that have stillbirths is caused by the lack of oxygen in the mother's blood. Remember that the baby hasn't even breathed air yet. It's getting all of its oxygen from the mother's blood. So if there's less oxygen diffused towards the fetus through the placenta, the baby is less likely to survive. While we're here, alcohol also can cause miscarriages, premature births, and also stillbirths as well. This activity here is showing you some patterns that we see with the rate of cigarette smoke. So spend a few seconds just working out what this table is actually showing us. we see that the more cigarettes smoked per day, the higher the risk of developing cardiovascular disease or coronary heart disease. Now let's look at diet.
Now, where are the snacks?
Polar bears are the largest land carnivores alive at the moment. I've got some scales and a fat cell at the bottom here. Each of these will help you answer these challenge questions. Have a go. In the bottom image, we see that the fat is stored in the cytoplasm, the jelly-like substance that where chemical reactions happen. Polar bears live in cold environments, and so a layer of fat can act as an insulator that reduces the heat, the thermal energy that they're losing, which keeps them warm. Finally, using all the information here, we see that the left bear is skinny due to it not eating enough food, so it's not getting enough energy. This means that its body will break down its fat stores so that it can be used for energy. Remember, it's not only carbohydrates that are used for energy, fats are also used for energy as well. But the bear on the right is the opposite. It is eating more energy than its body needs, so its body is storing that extra energy as fat. The scales are here to remind you of the simple equation that energy is never created or destroyed, it's just converted from one form to another. Here the bottom image shows BMI, which is your body mass index, and some other information here as well to help you answer these challenge questions here. Green vegetables tend to have low calories, which is why people trying to diet or lose weight will eat salads. Remember the polar bear and the scales, they're trying to limit the energy that they're taking in. The table is showing that the higher your level of training or activity, the more calories you need to consume. This makes sense because you will need that energy for aerobic respiration in your muscles, which help you move around. A little bit of trivia for you here. The word muscle actually comes from the Latin word for mouse, because your biceps, if you flex them, they look like one and they move around a little bit like a mouse underneath your skin. This brings us to the final challenge question. Top athletes take in more calories than some obese people, but they're not obese because they are exercising a lot, which means that the body is using up all of that energy, so it can't be stored because it's being used for their movement. Obesity also increases the likelihood of you getting type 2 diabetes, but we'll cover that in season 2. And there we go! The lesson is done.
Fatality.
Chop the revision materials in the description, use the time skips to skip to exactly where you want to go, and I'll catch you guys in a bit.